It is the small hours of the morning, just before 3 o'clock, on the 7th of May, 1945, in the French city of Reims. A German officer in a long gray coat is being led down a narrow corridor inside a red brick schoolhouse. A few minutes ago, in a crowded classroom filled with maps and bright lights, he signed the surrender of Germany. His name is Alfred Jodl, and he is one of the most senior officers left in what remains of the German command. Now, he is walking toward another room, where one man is waiting for him. That man is General Dwight Eisenhower, the supreme commander of the Allied forces in Europe, the man who commanded the armies that beat him. Jodl is a professional soldier. He has spent his whole life inside a code that says there are rules between soldiers, even at the end. As he steps into the room, he does the thing that code demands. He brings his heels together, and he raises his hand to salute. What Eisenhower does in the next few seconds is the whole story. To understand why that moment mattered so much, you have to understand the man who walked in expecting it to go a certain way. Alfred Jodl was the chief of the operations staff of the German armed forces. For most of the war, he had stood at the center of Hitler's military planning. He was not a frontline hero. He was a desk soldier, a man of maps and orders and signatures, the kind of officer who believed that war was a profession with its own honor, like law or medicine. And in the world he came from, the old European officer class, a salute was close to sacred. You saluted a worthy enemy. The enemy saluted you back. Even in defeat, the soldiers' courtesies were supposed to survive the battle. A beaten general expected to be received as a beaten general with a cold face, perhaps, but with the basic respect one fighting man owes another. A handshake, a nod. The acknowledgement that, whatever had happened, they were both members of the same ancient brotherhood of arms. That is what Jodl expected when he walked toward Eisenhower's office. He had every reason to expect it. It was how surrenders had worked for centuries. He had no idea that the American waiting for him had already decided, years earlier, that this particular courtesy was dead. Let's go back 2 days, to the 6th of May, 1945. Germany is finished, and everyone knows it. Hitler is dead, by his own hand, in a bunker beneath the ruins of Berlin. The man he named as his successor, Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, has one goal left. He wants to save as many German soldiers as he can from the Soviet armies closing in from the east. So he sends Jodl to Eisenhower's headquarters at Reims with a careful plan. Jodl is to offer a surrender, but only of the German forces still fighting the Western Allies. The troops in the east would keep fighting the Russians, or slip westward to surrender to the Americans and the British instead, who they assumed would treat them better. It was a clever plan, and Eisenhower saw straight through it. He had seen something like it before. In 1918, at the end of the First World War, Germany had agreed to an armistice, a ceasefire, not a true surrender. The German army had marched home in formation, and within a generation, a story took hold inside Germany that the soldiers had never really been beaten on the battlefield, only betrayed at home. That myth helped feed everything that came after. Eisenhower was determined that it would not happen twice. There would be no clever arrangement, no partial peace, no soldiers marching home telling themselves they had not truly lost. So, when Jodl's proposal reached him, Eisenhower refused even to discuss it. He sent word back through his chief of staff. The surrender would be total, all fronts, east and west, every German soldier laying down arms at once, and he added a threat with teeth. If the Germans kept stalling, he would seal the entire Western Front. He would shut the door. Any German soldier still in the east would be trapped there, left to face the Soviet army with no escape to the west at all. Jodl radioed the terms back to Dönitz. There was nothing left to bargain with. Dönitz gave the order to sign. And so, in the small hours of the 7th of May, the German delegation was brought into that schoolroom in Reims. Notice who was not in the room: Eisenhower. The supreme commander, the man whose name was on the whole campaign, refused to be present for the signing. He stayed in a nearby office and let his chief of staff, Lieutenant General Walter Bedell Smith, receive the surrender on his behalf, alongside representatives of the Soviet Union and France. This was a deliberate choice, and it was the first quiet signal of what Jodl was walking into. Eisenhower would not share a table with these men. He would not lend the moment the dignity of his presence. The signing was paperwork, and he sent a deputy to handle the paperwork. Those who were there remembered how strange the mood was. There was no cheering. One of the American officers present later wrote that what struck him was the lack of emotion in the room, that he did not see a single Allied officer show any elation as the surrender was signed. It was not a celebration. It was something quieter and heavier than that. Down the hall, Eisenhower paced back and forth in his office. His driver and aide, Kay Summersby, who was with him, described the room as electric with his impatience and, at the same time, she thought, rather lonely. Jodl signed at last with a fountain pen, a little before 3 in the morning. The war in Europe was over on paper. And then, the officers escorting Jodl walked him down that corridor to the one part of the night Dunitz's plan had never accounted for. They brought him to meet the Supreme Commander himself. This is the moment the whole story has been building toward. Eisenhower was standing behind his desk, rigid, stone-faced. The man who had paced the floor for hours was now perfectly still. Jodl entered, stopped, brought his heels together with the sharp click of a career officer and saluted. It was the gesture of a lifetime, the reflex of a man raised inside the code, soldier to soldier, the beaten general presenting himself to the victor. And Eisenhower did not return it. He did not salute back. He did not offer his hand. He did not offer Jodl a seat. He simply looked at the German across the room, and the silence in that office said everything that needed saying. Then Eisenhower spoke not warmly, not with the grudging respect of one professional for another, but coldly and only to confirm the facts. He asked Jodl a single question. Did he fully understand the terms of the document he had just signed? Jodl said that he did. Eisenhower told him that he would be held personally and officially responsible if those terms were broken in any way. And then, in 3 words, he was finished with him. That is all. That was it. No ceremony, no handshake, no acknowledgement of the brotherhood Jodl had assumed they shared. Jodl saluted once more and turned to leave. One account of the scene says that as he walked out, he stumbled, tripping over a cable on the floor, the small, human stumble of a man whose whole framework of meaning had just been pulled out from under him. Even Eisenhower's dog, a Scottish terrier named Telek, was said to have growled at Jodl as he left the room. And here is the question the whole video has been circling. Why? Why would Eisenhower, a soldier himself, a man famous for his easy grin and his decency, refuse the one gesture that every fighting man understands? Was it cruelty? Was it personal? It was neither. And the answer is the most important part of this story. This was not a sudden decision made in the heat of that night. Eisenhower had made it years before. Back in May of 1943, after Axis forces surrendered in Tunisia in North Africa, there had been an expectation that Eisenhower would receive the defeated enemy commander with the traditional courtesies. The way generals had done for centuries, he refused. He would not perform the old ritual of honoring a beaten foe because he did not believe this enemy had earned it. The Nazi regime, in his eyes, had forfeited the right to be treated like an honorable opponent. He would not, he made clear, extend the hand of a soldier to men who served that cause. But the deepest reason did not come from a battlefield at all. It came from something Eisenhower had seen just a few weeks before that night in Reims. Go back to the 12th of April, 1945, less than a month before the surrender. On that day, Eisenhower drove to a place called Ohrdruf in central Germany. It was a concentration camp, a sub-camp of Buchenwald. And it was the first such camp liberated by American forces. He went with Generals George Patton and Omar Bradley. What they found there is almost beyond describing. The camp was still full of the bodies of murdered prisoners, left where they had fallen by the SS guards who had fled. There were corpses stacked like firewood. There were the half-burned remains of people the guards had tried to destroy on pyres before the Americans arrived. Patton, one of the toughest soldiers America ever produced, walked off to the side and was physically sick. Bradley could not speak. And Eisenhower made himself look. Witnesses said his face went frozen and white, and that he forced himself to walk through every corner of that camp to examine every nook and cranny of it. He did it on purpose. He said afterward that he made himself see all of it so that he would be able to bear witness firsthand, if the day ever came when someone tried to claim these things had never happened, that it was all just propaganda. He was so shaken that he cabled Washington and said that everything the newspapers had printed about the camps was, if anything, an understatement. He demanded that congressmen and journalists be flown over to see it with their own eyes. He ordered nearby American units to tour the camp so that the soldiers would know exactly what they had been fighting against. Now hold those two scenes side by side. The camp at Ohrdruf in April and the German general's salute in Reims in May. This is the vindication the whole story was built toward. When Alfred Jodl clicked his heels and raised his hand and waited for the courtesies of war, Eisenhower was not looking at a fellow soldier. He was looking at a senior representative of the regime that had built Ohrdruf. He had stood among those bodies less than a month before. He had seen what that uniform served. And there was no version of military tradition, no centuries-old code of honor that could make Eisenhower lift his hand in return. The salute was a question. Am I still your equal, one soldier to another? Eisenhower's silence was the answer. No, not anymore. Not after what he had seen. A little over a year later, in October of 1946, Alfred Jodl was tried at Nuremberg, convicted and hanged. The man who walked into that office expecting the respect of one general for another left it as something else entirely, not a soldier, but a defendant. And that is what Eisenhower did when a German general saluted him first. He did nothing. He gave back nothing. And in that nothing, he passed a kind of judgment that no signed document ever could. So here is the question I want to leave you with, and I really do want to know what you think. Was Eisenhower right to refuse the salute and the handshake to break the old code and treat Jodl not as a defeated soldier but as a criminal? Or does honoring the traditions between soldiers matter even when the enemy is at his worst? There is a real argument on both sides, and I'd love to read yours. Tell me in the comments below. If this story moved you, do me one quick favor and hit the like button. It genuinely is the thing that tells YouTube to show this history to more people, and these stories deserve to be remembered. And there is one more chapter to this you should hear. Because there was a second surrender ceremony the very next day, forced by Stalin in the ruins of Berlin, and the story of why Germany had to surrender twice, and what happened in that Berlin room, is even stranger than this one. I'll be telling it in the next video, so subscribe and you won't miss it. Thanks for watching.